G'day, welcome back to the channel. Now, since I made the last video about this ridiculous situation banning drone imports and critical drone parts from being imported by the USA, I've had a lot of feedback. I've watched a lot of other stuff. I've talked to a lot of people, and I think it's fair to say that the biggest thing at the moment is everybody's confused. What the hell is really going on? Is the US government really going to kill the hobby? And so in this video, I'm going to try and look at that. I'm going to try and predict what is really the likely outcome. I'm going to look at ways we can perhaps circumvent some of this ban if we need to as a hobby. And I'm just going to look at the hobby and what's happened to it. So I'm going to start with the hobby as it used to be, back in the good old days, back in the 1940s and 1950s. Now up here, you can see that back in those days, the hobby of flying model aircraft was as American as apple pie. It was even sponsored by the Plymouth Motor Group, a major US auto company sponsored the hobby because it was seen as a great thing, a character building thing, and the AMA sanctioned it, and it was every kid was encouraged to be an aero modeler, to build and fly model aircraft, because not only did it get them outdoors, not only did it teach them to use their hands and give them valuable skills, it also was a stepping stone to a career in aviation or aerospace. Neil Armstrong, first man on the moon, he started with model aircraft way back. And so it's always been seen as a really healthy, a crucial, integral part of the fabric that made US society what it was. So what's gone wrong? Why is it that today, if you fly a drone, you're vilified? You're seen as someone who's trying to spy on your neighbours, who's perhaps, Karens will come out of the woodwork and rip you a new one because you're flying a drone. And even RC model aircraft are not exempt because the AMA didn't demand that a line be drawn between the traditional hobby and these newfangled camera drones. No. They were happy for them all to be lumped in together, because I think, as far as I was thinking, well, if they're all lumped in together, we could get millions of new members from drone flyers, people with camera drones. It didn't work that way, of course, because it's totally, really, the cultures are quite different, even though the craft may be somewhat similar. So, yeah, we've gone from being, revered to reviled in a few short decades. Really, really sad. But first of all, I want to talk about something else. A lot of people, not a lot, but there are some people who criticise me. They say I'm a doomsayer. I'm a drama queen. I'm just blowing this all out of proportion. I wish I was. I really do wish I was. But if you analyse my predictions, ever since the revocation of Section 336, my predictions for the hobby, I've been exactly on the money, absolutely every step of the way. How did I do that? Well, look at me. I'm old. I'm nearly 73. I've seen a lot of things happen. Not many of them have been good. And most of my detractors, most of my critics are much younger than me. And when you're young, you have this naive perspective, this belief, you want to believe that politicians, bureaucrats, regulators, that they're working in the public good. They've got altruistic aspirations. They want to do the right thing. And it's understandable, because you don't have the benefit of years of hindsight. So you think, they're doing the right thing. They wouldn't possibly do something really bad, because they're the government, or they're the regulator, or whatever. Now, after 73 years, I've seen how these institutions function time and time again, and it's seldom good. I've seen the same strategies used over and over again to disempower groups and communities through thin end of the wedge strategies and other things. Exactly the strategies that are being used now with this hobby. Now, I'm going to give you a bit of a history lesson, what's gone on and where I think we're going, because prior to the revocation of Section 336, and if you don't know, that was a piece of legislation that protected the hobby, because the hobby was as American as apple pie, and it was a great stepping stone into the aviation industry. It was revered, and the government wanted to protect it from regulation by the FAA. These are just people having fun flying toy planes. They don't need to be regulated like they're the captain of a 747, so leave them alone, the government said. They put protection in there to make sure the FAA didn't mess around and ruin our hobby. And that worked fine. But then, when drones came along, multi-rotor drones, and we saw the potential for them to be used for commercial purposes like delivering pizzas and tube socks, a number of companies decided we want to make some money out of these commercial drones. So they got together and formed a group called the Commercial Drone Alliance, the CDA. And the CDA started petitioning politicians, saying there's a lot of money to be made if we can fly our commercial drones in this 0 to 400 foot airspace, but we can't do it safely as long as there's hobbyists using it for their toy planes and their camera drones. You've got to get them out of there. And of course, America is a capitalist society, and the holy grail of many within that society is to make as much money as they can. So politicians were easily swayed by companies coming to them and saying, if you clear the space, we'll make lots of money. And we'll enrich in the whole of America because it'll increase our GDP and there'll be jobs. And so the politicians said, hey, no problem. There's just kids with toys. We'll get rid of them. So the first step was to remove the protection, Section 336, so that then the FAA could come in and regulate. And when that happened, I said, this is not good. This is the start of a slippery slope. This is not going to end well for this hobby. And what happened next? Well, there's 3 or 4 steps to eradicating something you don't want. When you're a bureaucrat and you've got a group you want to get rid of, there's 3 or 4 steps. The first one is find out who they are. So what did the FAA do? Well, you've got to register. You've got to go on our offenders list. If you've got a drone or a model aircraft over 250 grams, you've got to register. So then they know who you are, right? That's the first step every time they do something like that. The next step is to make sure you know what they're doing and where they're doing it. So what do? Remote ID. Let's track them. Let's track these drones. Now, the technology is there, whether they're using it or not. This is part of the strategy, being able to track the use of these drones. We know who they are. We want to know where they are and what they're doing. We'll track them. And then another strategy is corralling. We want to get them out of the public view so that the public forgets them. We want to corral them into little grassy fields in the middle of nowhere. I know, let's call them freers. So these steps have been used before in various forms with other ways of eradicating. The final step, of course, is we pass rules that make it impossible for them to continue with what they're doing because we need that airspace for our commercial drone friends. So that's been the driving force. We've had this thing about, national security bullshit. It's all about the dollars. It's all about the dollars. There is a small security perspective, but you've got to remember, there has never been a single death attributed in the entire history of mankind anywhere on the planet as a result of the recreational use of a multi-rotor drone. So is it really as dangerous as they say? Yeah, sure. In Ukraine, we've got people blowing each other up with FPV drones with bombs on, but if you're worried about that, you should not be worrying about drones. You've got to worry about bombs because, as I've said so many times before, a drone without a bomb is just a drone. But a bomb without a drone is still a damn bomb. So you shouldn't be worried about the drones, worry about the bombs. That's the really dangerous stuff, right? But no, America, they go, we can help our commercial drone people by getting rid of the hobbyists by claiming they're a security threat. And that's exactly what they're doing. So now we have this regulation in place that enables the US government at the flick of a switch to halt the import of foreign-made drones and critical components of drones like batteries, motors, flight controls, all that sort of stuff. Will they do it? Will they do it? Because I've had a lot of people come back and say, yeah, well, they won't do it. It's just, no, it's not going to happen like this. No, you're all wrong. And they may not do it straight away. I've got to concede they may not do it. We may not see any change to the hobby in the immediate future. But if I'm correct, and I've been correct all the way down the track so far, what they have done here is they have implemented a preemptive mechanism to turn off the hobby. And now they'll wait for the excuse. And what will the excuse be? Well, it's going to be simple. The very first time there is a terror attack or an attempted terror attack on domestic US soil using a drone, that's it. The hobby is over. And they've got the mechanism in place to stop it. They will say, we're no longer allowing any imports of any drone components from any foreign country because of national security. And at the moment, if they did that, there'd be a big pushback. People, what are you doing? You're cancelling a hobby. But once there has been an evidenced attack, they can justify it. Say, look, we've got to protect Americans by cancelling this hobby. It's too much of a risk because someone could get killed or someone's been killed. That's what they're doing. So now they're laying the groundwork. And trust me, this is that step to eradication. It's the next step. I guarantee it to you. And people will say, oh, you're just a doomsayer. Look at my track record. Argue that. So, yeah, that indeed is a bit of a worry. Now, also, if we want to talk about my pedigree in this area, I've been right all the way along. And also, it goes back much further than that. In 2002, I built the first kamikaze drone in private hands. In 2002, I got into an immense amount of trouble for trying to do the right thing. I saw a vulnerability that you could go online, you could buy all the bits you needed to build what effectively was a kamikaze drone, but I called it a low-cost cruise missile. A craft capable of carrying an explosive payload that could self-guide it to a destination. The things they're using in the Ukraine conflict right now, the weapon of choice, kamikaze drones. And I built mine and publicized the fact almost 25 years ago. And I said, look, this is a looming vulnerability. And what did I get for my efforts? I got into huge trouble. The US government came down like a ton of bricks on the New Zealand government, who came down like a ton of bricks on me. I wasn't doing anything illegal, but what I was doing was embarrassing governments. I got emails from high-ranking people within the US military saying, thank you for what you've done, because we've been trying to raise this issue with our superiors and getting nowhere. And you've done it. So I got into a snot load of trouble. In fact, the local, or the television broadcaster in New Zealand did a documentary on me. Here's some footage.
That anyone can build one of these, and we all should be worried.
Well, actually, I don't want a cruise missile at all. The whole thing is an exercise in proof of concept. I mean, I have no application for a cruise missile. I don't know any unfriendly nations I'd like to deal a deathly blow to.
But at home and abroad, there are those who take a dim view of backyard inventors building GPS-guided missiles for less than $5,000 apiece.
I think his so-called justification is very dubious. He is, in effect, spreading technology to make it easier for terrorists and others to manufacture cruise missiles. It's not a good idea.
Richard Spear, former U.S. Defense Department official, helped create America's missile technology control regime.
So that's right, you do the right thing, you get a whack on the hand for doing it. But this is my pedigree. I saw this a quarter of a century before it happened. Quarter of a century. So how do I do it? Well, as I say, I've been around for 73 years. I learn from everything I see. I try and remember everything I see. And I, just like AI, I put it all together and I extrapolate the future from past events. So I think I have pretty good confidence in my predictions here that, first of all, nothing's going to happen immediately. But the moment there is an excuse to shut down the hobby and free the skies for our commercial drone friends, then the hobby will be cancelled through the mechanisms that were put in place on the 22nd of December 2025. So yeah, but the next question is, can we get around this? Can we circumvent these things? Can we, dodge this? If they do decide to restrict, batteries and motors, how can we get around that? Well, I think that's pretty easy because typically bureaucrats are not that bright, and they have said that they have this covered list for these components when used as a part of an unmanned aerial system. So if you want to bring in a LiPo, import a LiPo, you say it's for an RC truck. That's not an unmanned aerial system, it's a ground vehicle. Or it's for an RC boat. Same goes for motors. It's going to be so easy to skirt this because they've poorly defined what they're doing. And they're probably unaware that these things are used for other purposes as well. So I think it won't have an immediate impact. And if they do decide to implement it, they're going to have to go back and revise it because they screwed it up in the first place. Occam's razor. The simplest solution is the obvious one. They just couldn't be bothered doing the job properly, and so there are gaping holes in this covered list thing. So, yeah, that's what I think. Now, what I have done is I've run this through Gemini AI. I don't use AI to make videos because I'm not a fan of AI slop, but I do use it as a research tool. So I thought I would ask questions of Google Gemini. I'll put a link to that conversation in the description of this video. You can go and see what Gemini says, and you can see the questions I asked and the responses I got, which kind of reinforce what I've been saying all along. One final thing to look at in this, and I say it's all about money rather than security, is who benefits. If they do decide to ban the importation of drones and critical drone parts, who benefits from this? Well, I'll tell you who benefits. The domestic US drone industry. That's obvious, and it's part of Trump's rationale. They want to boost local manufacturing by blocking imports, and it's a fairly straightforward idea. It might work. You can't argue against that, but we need to look at the composition of the US drone industry. There's a company called Unusual Machines, one of the key players in the US domestic drone industry. Guess who has millions of dollars in stocks on that company? Who owns millions of dollars of stock of Unusual Machines? Donald Trump Jr. He's also a member of the advisory board of that company, and assumingly receiving a remuneration for that as well. So Donald Trump Jr. stands to benefit enormously if the flow of incoming parts and drones is blocked at the border by the FCC. Another interesting coincidence is this story running on Ars Technica, which highlights the fact that the head of the FCC is a real big supporter and friend of Donald Trump. So if you want some help, and this is just opinion, I'm not making any aspersions, I'm not casting any aspersions. If I was in that position, I would think, great, I'll get my friends to help me make my boy rich. It's just an opinion. I'm not saying that's what happened, but it certainly, it does have a whiff to it, doesn't it? It does have a whiff, because the rationale for this is national security, even though drones have never, recreational flying and multi-rotor drones never killed anybody. It's national security, when in reality it seems to be more about making sure you take care of your friends using other friends, in my honestly held opinion, protected by the Constitution in America and the human rights legislation around the world. So you can't sue me, I'm sorry. That's it. As I said, it's a very complicated, multifaceted situation. What do we do? I don't know. Even the most seasoned people have had trouble making sense of it. I exchanged some messages with Brendan Schulman, formerly of DJI, a qualified lawyer, now working for Boston Dynamics. He got it wrong. I had to correct him, point out where he'd made a mistake interpreting what was going on. He thought it was just for Autel and DJI parts, but no, I've spent a lot of time poring over this documentation. I pointed out, no, this is in addition to the DJI stuff. And he was polite enough to respond that I was right and, corrected him. So when the very best lawyers in the business can't make sense of it, it's obviously perhaps designed to confuse. Maybe it's designed to confuse. Confusion can cover a lot of motives. But there you go, that's me, conspiracy theorist, man, what the hell would I know? 73 years old and seen it all before. So thank you very much for watching. And I appreciate those people who support me in trying to protect this hobby. And ultimately, I will protect it. I'll make bloody sure that no tin pot bureaucrat's going to rip it out of our hands just to satisfy the demands of a few commercial drone companies and the paranoia of the US government. It's not going to happen on my watch. And if you can help me, I'd appreciate it. Thank you for watching. See you soon.